was a cheap sound, and that sounds awful, but you can recognise metal songs from that era because of that particular sound. It's you're working in possibly 8-track studios max, whereas these days you've got 12 tracks on a drum kit alone. The drum kit goes through 1 track, you haven't got time for anything else or space for anything else.
Def Leppard EP is one of the high points of very early new wave of British heavy metal. Very interesting to note who picked it up at Radio 1. John Peel, right, who would have been totally opposed to what Def Leppard became. Andy Peebles, the doyen of soul music, as was at the time on Radio 1. He picked it up. He was a DJ that liked music. And honestly, that's a rarity. It really is. But his thing was soul music. And yet he could see or could hear, you know, there was something in what Def Leppard did on that early. And that's the thing about Leppard. The reason that Leppard sort of got noticed so quickly was because they wrote bloody good songs. You know, let's not deny it. Maiden perhaps took a little longer to develop. Whereas, you know, Steve Harris was thinking a bit of punk, a bit of prog, and a bit of UFO, let's see what happens. Leppard were like, sweet, Slade, you know, great catchy songs, let's do that. You know, still loud and abrasive and reactionary, but, you know, and that's probably why Leppard got noticed so quickly. They really, and always have concentrated, no matter how flippant critics' remarks have been down the years about what they do, they've always been very, very, very sort of careful about how they wrote their songs.
Maiden soon followed suit, and in November 1979, the band pressed and released 3 songs from their demo to create a higher profile calling card, the legendary Soundhouse tapes.
That demo tape was released on their own label. They only did a 5,000 pressing because they wanted to keep it exclusive for the fans, and it was called the Soundhouse tapes. And we had a copy of that in the office, and it was just, well, we had to have it, and it's been played every day. Everyone loved it. It was fantastic. It was a breath of fresh air, really, at the time. The thing about the Soundhouse tapes was they were very raw, but also very cocksure, and they had catchy tunes. I mean, so it had the power, but it also had great hooks, and it stood out at the time because, firstly, because to all of the rock papers, rock had been written off. Everyone was only interested in punk, new wave, and reggae, two-tone a bit later. So there was no interest in heavy metal. As far as the people who worked on music papers were concerned, heavy metal was dead and buried. And so to hear this and to hear something that was young and vibrant and exciting and actually well played, but aggressive too, it really did stand out for everybody.
Maiden's Soundhouse tapes obviously was a pivotal release in the new wave of British heavy metal genre. I mean, I just thought, you know, taking the music to one side for an instant, I just thought it was amazing that a band of Maiden's stature, which was small and insignificant at that point, had actually got something out, because really, you know, apart from obviously the punk do-it-yourself ethic, you weren't really too accustomed to metal bands doing their own thing. You know, you'd be more used to it, you know, getting a single on EMI accompanied by a lavish press release and a beautiful 10x8 photo. So to get this, you know, scabby Soundhouse tapes thing through, you know, was a bit of an eye opener, really. And I think you know, perfectly captured Maiden's spirit at that time.
They were selling it off the back of their truck, and they couldn't get enough. I mean, they never thought they'd sell them that quick. And when they went back to press more, you know, the dreadful thing had happened. They didn't have enough money on the demo tape to actually keep the like the masters and stuff. And when Steve, I think it was, went back to, you know, get the masters and do more pressings, they'd gone over it. They couldn't even buy it or anything. It had gone, you know. Then they couldn't afford to pay for the tapes at the time of the recording, and yeah, it had gone.
Yet Maiden didn't require any further copies to make their mark. Weeks before the release of the Soundhouse tapes, the band had been offered a recording contract with EMI, and in mid-November, they debuted on the Radio 1 Rock Show. Elsewhere, freshly signed bands were recording and unleashing their debut albums, and the first of the major new wave acts to release a long player were Yorkshiremen Saxon.
They're from Barnsley, you know. Their gimmick was that they preferred a cup of tea to a pint of beer, which is a load of bollocks, but I mean, you know, that's their little bit of spin. They were important in the scheme of the new wave of British heavy metal, but I think benefited very much from the fact that it happened. Whereas Maiden and Leppard, in the early days, sort of spearheaded the movement. Saxon, to a certain extent, benefited and were lucky that it happened. Because the first Saxon album isn't very good.
Saxon's first album was, I think it's quite unique, and looking back at it now, it's a very, very good album. There's no two ways about it. The band themselves will tell you that it's not quite what they had in mind. And later albums, Wheels of Steel in particular, I know I was told that the demos of Wheels of Steel are almost exactly the way the album turned out. But Biff was on record as saying that the trouble with the first album is when they went home at night, the producer, John Verity, who was known for his melodic touches, would then add all these backing vocals. And he referred to it as the Ooh Ooh Ah Ah album, because they didn't have backing vocals, they didn't have a backing singer. So strip away a lot of the gloss and strip away all the backing harmonics, and you've actually got quite a heavy album, a very different album.
Samson were the second band to release a debut album in '79. Formed by guitarist and vocalist Paul Samson 2 years beforehand, their heavy blues rock sound had made them a favourite at the bandwagon, and they'd issued 2 self-pressed singles in 1978, which many see as the first releases of the new wave of British heavy metal. Having recruited drummer Barry Graham after his short stint in Iron Maiden, their first album, Survivors, hit the stores in May.
Samson was put together by Paul Samson and was heavily influenced from early blues type of bands. Now, the kind of bands that Paul was influenced by were Grand Funk, Mountain, all those kind of bands, English bands like the Groundhogs. For those of you who don't know these bands, look them up, because you'd be surprised at how much you would be able to hear the influence that these bands actually fed into the new wave of British heavy metal. So we were a blues-orientated band, but with an attack of a hard rock band. It was honest. It was really, you know, a pushy type of band, and it was just filled with energy.
You find a single dancer, you pass us in the streets, you ignore us when you see us, and crush us with your feet. Well, waiting for you, big brother's coming through. Well, fighting outside, big brother next in line.
Paul Samson, God rest his soul, was a blues rocker at heart. Probably as bemused by the new wave of British heavy metal as you know, Robin Trower might have been. You know, I mean, that's really where his heart lay. And just again caught up in, you know, where you have bands like Jaguar and